When we talk about these drivers of baby sleep, we're often wanting as parents to have more control over how our babies sleep, when they sleep, how long they sleep. But if we go back to this very basic idea of the driver for baby sleep is baby brain development, then we can look at what is it that mature sleep even looks like.
Welcome to the Baby Sleep Connection, a podcast that explores baby sleep and more through the lens of attachment and development. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. I'm a mom of 3, an occupational therapist, and a certified infant and family sleep specialist. If you are a tired parent who wants to support your baby's sleep holistically, keep listening as we delve into approaches that go well beyond the usual strategies of wake windows and bedtime routines. Your baby's sleep is connected with so much more.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Baby Sleep Connection. I'm your host, Heather Boyd, mom of 3, baby sleep coach and occupational therapist, and I am so glad that you're here. We are talking today about what drives your baby to sleep. Now, if you are like a lot of parents, including me when my little ones were very little, you may be wishing that you were in the driver's seat when it came to sleep. And if you've been trying to find a way to support your baby's sleep for at least a little while, you're probably realizing that you are not in the driver's seat when it comes to your baby's sleep. This can be a real challenge to adapt to at a time when everything is feeling a bit topsy-turvy, when all of the things that you used to have control over you don't, and now you discover, despite all the messages that you get about you being in charge of your baby's sleep, that you realize that you have very little control over whether your baby sleeps or not. Now, why is this? And what is it that's driving your baby to sleep? Well, sleep is really coming from the brain. And we know that a baby's brain is very immature. It looks very different than an adult brain. And if we look at what sleep looks like, baby sleep is very different than adult sleep. It's not the same. So what is it that's helping the brain allow the body to sleep? Well, we've got a few things, and I'm going to put my bit of a geek hat on. I love understanding the science of sleep, and I'm going to touch on it today. If you are not a lover of science and how things work, I'm just touching on it lightly today. So you don't have to worry about this getting really deep. In fact, I imagine that for most of you, you've heard of some of these concepts, and the ones that you haven't may be part of the missing piece in how you understand why your baby's sleep looks the way that it does. So we know that as the brain develops and a baby is getting used to being out in the world, in that first few months especially, there is something that develops called circadian rhythm. Now, anyone that has just been through the time change in March knows the impact of clock versus circadian rhythm. When the time changes, our bodies don't just change because circadian rhythm is tied to sunshine and darkness, not to the time on the clock. When sunshine hits our retina, especially in the morning when you have the sun rising, it really helps the brain switch over into daytime hormones. And as the sun is setting in the evening, we switch over into nighttime hormones. Now, when we talk about the importance of understanding how your baby's sleep is working, we know that circadian rhythm is part of it. We know that's why a newborn is sleeping throughout the day and night evenly. There is no daytime versus nighttime sleep. It's all just spread out over the 24 hours. And yet, the more your baby gets used to this night versus day, or dark versus light, the more that they develop more of their sleep at night and less sleep during the day. That I talked about the morning hormones versus the evening hormones, and you may recognize these as well. The evening hormone that starts to show up as your baby's brain matures and as they get exposed to sunlight is melatonin. It does a whole bunch of things, but in terms of sleep, I call it the sleepy hormone. And in the morning, what drives us to wake up is the wake hormone, cortisol. Now, I realize even hearing the word cortisol, you probably think about stress, but I consider it, in terms of sleep, it's the get out of bed hormone. We need cortisol to be able to start our day and get started. Now, of course, with a baby, these hormones are not well regulated, and they may not even be produced in ways that we can measure for a few months at least. And so in understanding what is driving your baby's sleep, as their brain matures, these hormones start regulating sleep a little bit better, and you're at least seeing more sleep at night than during the day, which for any of you with very, very young babies, you know what a win that is. Notice, however, that you're not all that directly involved in making that happen. Yes, you can change up the environment and make sure that your baby is getting some outdoor sun in the mornings and that lights are turned out low in the evening. But this is a process that is done over time and is mainly outside of your control. Now, there is another piece to this, though. It's not just about circadian rhythm. If it were, then once circadian rhythm were in place, we'd be good to go. But we know there is so much more to it than that, not just in the moment, but over time as the brain matures too. In the moment, from within a 24-hour day, we're also working with something in addition to these wake and sleep hormones, something called sleep pressure. And it is basically the balancing act that the brain wants to find. It really wants a balancing act between wakefulness and sleep so that the body gets enough sleep to be able to function. We know that sleep has so much value in terms of cleaning out all the dust and cobwebs in our brain overnight, of putting those new learning experiences into long-term memory. It's our ability to learn can happen through nighttime sleep. But the way that we get there, in addition to circadian rhythm, is the sleep pressure that builds. Basically, with sleep pressure, it is something that builds the longer that we are awake until we relieve that pressure with sleep. Now, for an adult who doesn't have very young children, generally sleep pressure builds over the entire course of the day until we get to bedtime. So we can stay up, and of course, this is parents who do not have young children, because of course, as parents of young children or babies, you're probably exhausted during the day and could probably sleep if the opportunity arose. But with sleep pressure, I like to think of it as being like a pressure cooker. The pressure builds and builds and builds until your whole body is just drawn into sleep. For a baby, that can often happen anywhere and anytime, just based on how long they've been awake. Now, one of the things that I love learning about with sleep science is to know that the sleep pressure isn't just, again, based on the clock. It's actually a hormone that gets released in our blood system called somnogens, and that is what draws us into sleep. Those somnogens really build up the longer we're awake. Now, of course, with a baby or young child who is napping, that sleep pressure builds up pretty quickly and requires a release of that pressure with a nap. They don't get through the whole day without a nap, because that homeostasis, that balance, isn't reached without a nap partway through the day. Of course, it is the brain maturing that allows this whole thing to unfold. And the more mature your baby's brain becomes, the longer they can go before sleep pressure builds up enough to need to stop for rest and for sleep. When we talk about these drivers of baby sleep, we're often wanting as parents to have more control over how our babies sleep, when they sleep, how long they sleep. But if we go back to this very basic idea of the driver for baby sleep is baby brain development, then we can look at what is it that mature sleep even looks like. When you start with a newborn baby who is sleeping evenly throughout the 24-hour period, there is no indication whatsoever that they're aware of day and night when it comes to sleep, at least not in the early weeks. But with sleep maturation, what we inevitably see is that sleep cycles get longer, sleep gets deeper, babies spend less time in REM sleep, that rapid eye movement sleep, the dream sleep, and babies start, eventually, to be able to fall back asleep between sleep cycles. Now, if you consider those four things, sleep cycles getting longer, sleep getting deeper, babies spending less time in REM sleep, and babies starting to be able to fall back asleep when they wake up, notice that those 4 things are all brain-based. They aren't within your control. And so when you're feeling like you should be doing more to create better sleep for your baby, when you feel guilty about not getting it right or not figuring out the magic sauce or the secret sauce that's going to help your baby sleep, know that those 4 drivers are in charge, and those 4 drivers are linked to the brain development that your baby is going through. These steps don't happen because of you, which means if we back up even further and look at the allure of sleep training and the promise of sleep training, none of these 4 things happen because of sleep training. Sleep training is behavioral. We're changing the behavior of sleep when we try to sleep train. These are all about brain maturation. Now, you could say the same thing about a lot of things happening in the brain, whether it's gross motor development like rolling and crawling, whether it is, heck, we can even talk about the teen brain and sleep and knowing that it looks very different than an adult brain as well. We certainly can't expect a baby to be looking any different than they do in terms of sleep. They can't be an adult. A baby's behavior is not an adult's behavior. So if you're not in charge of sleep, what are you in charge of? Because I know as a parent, when I was trying to figure out what my role was in supporting my baby's sleep, especially when it wasn't going well, and when I felt really guilty about not being able to get it right, it would have been really helpful for me to know what's in my lane. What am I in charge of here? If baby brain development is the driver, that baby is behind that steering wheel, what is it that I'm in charge of? Well, there are a few things, and I really think it's valuable to outline what it is that you are in charge of, because then you have something that you can put your attention on that can make a difference to support the quality of sleep for you and your baby. And the first is that you are in charge of meeting the need. The need is there to be met, not changed. Because what else if sleep isn't a vulnerable state, and if you're meeting the need, your baby feels safe enough to be able to fall asleep? Immature nervous systems, or in fact any nervous system, including ours, has a really hard time relaxing if we're stressed out or worried about our own safety. So by meeting the need, you are saying to your baby, all is right in the world. The people who care for you unconditionally and meet the needs that you have are here, and we're going to make sure that you have what you need to be able to let go into sleep. The second piece that you have control over is to trust the need. Now, I realize this can be so challenging when we've been told that we are in charge of fixing. We need to fix sleep, we need to make sleep better, we are in charge of sleep, and if we don't do anything, then we're either lazy parents or we're just not getting it right at all. And the fact is, when we trust the need, we acknowledge that we might not know why our babies aren't sleeping well. But if we know that something supports them in being able to relax into sleep, maybe not as easily as we wish, maybe not as quickly as we wish, and maybe not without those wake-ups that are happening overnight, but if we can trust that by meeting our baby's needs, and that the needs that are in front of us that we can support, we can actually support the entire process. It's like being the foundation that allows brain maturation to happen. Now, I'm going to veer off on a little side tangent here. One of the key frameworks that I use with my work with families and in understanding infant and child development is Gordon Neufeld's work. He is a child psychologist from BC, British Columbia, Canada, and he talks a lot about this idea of allowing babies to feel safe, allowing all of us to feel safe enough to be relaxed and secure. To do that, we meet the need and trust that that need is innate to that child. The third thing that you can do is another trust piece. It is trusting the process. We can't rush brain development. We are not in charge. We don't have the steering wheel in our hand, but we also don't have the foot on the accelerator. We are able to trust the process when we know that sleep development, like any aspect of development, unfolds generally in a predictable order, generally, much like seeing sleep cycles getting longer and sleep getting deeper. It unfolds in that particular and in an expected way, and that we can't rush to the end on this. And the last thing that you are in charge of, that you actually have some control over here, is to find the easiest, safe way to support your baby to sleep, so that you aren't trying so hard to make something happen that your baby isn't ready for, that you're exhausting you and you're actually missing an opportunity to maybe not enjoy, sometimes enjoy the process, but at least respect the process and be able to give your baby what they need in the easiest and safest way, so that you're not burning all this energy. I always think of it like trying to swim against the current, and that if baby sleep is developmental and it unfolds as the brain matures, then we could spend all our time trying to swim against the current, trying to make sleep look a certain way, when really if we went with the current of sleep development, if we went with the flow and understood that our job is to go with that flow of development and be able to support our babies where they're at with what they need, so that we're not using up all of our energy trying to go in the other direction. When it comes to supporting our baby's sleep maturation, for me it comes down to this. When we understand how baby sleep develops, we can put into perspective what our role is. And when we understand our role in supporting our baby's sleep, then we can conserve that energy to be able to enjoy the bigger picture of this parenting journey. There is so much more that we could cover on this, but I am hoping that these insights give you a big sigh of relief that if sleep is not working, it is not your fault. If sleep is not going smoothly, understanding how these pieces come into play over time can help you let go of some of those things, and will hopefully prevent you from trying to grip that steering wheel of sleep development when you're the backseat driver. So here's to being a parent who can get comfortable with being in the back seat on baby sleep development, while still knowing that it's okay to hold the map. In other episodes, we're going to take that map and break it down into looking at what is this progress that we can see in following this map of baby sleep maturation. We'll be talking in future episodes about what to expect developmentally from sleep at particular ages, but until then, I want to give you a little bit of homework. You won't be marked on it, you don't have to hand it in, but your homework is to look at what are some of the ways that you are trying to control your baby's sleep development, that if you let it go, sleep will not get worse, it will not get more difficult, and that it just might get easier. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. I do hope that you found the information and perspectives in this podcast episode helpful to you as you navigate your baby's sleep development. Of course, this podcast provides general information, and it isn't tailored to your family's reality or the specific needs of your baby. If you're concerned about your baby's sleep or health, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and you need a place to feel nurtured and reassured, you can find me on Instagram at familysleep.ca. Until next episode, look for the connections that support you and your baby.